What are the best and worst ways to do a lateral raise for maximizing side delts growth? Well, in this video, I'm gonna be ranking 15 different ways to do a lateral raise on a tier list from S for should definitely try these to D for do. And then at the end, I'm gonna crown one exercise as the best way to do a lateral raise and one exercise as the worst way to do a lateral raise. So let's get into the criteria. All right, so listen up. 3 criteria I'm using to rank these exercises. 1, does the exercise allow for a good stretch on the side delts, or at least have some sort of focus in that stretch part? Reason being is there's evidence showing that training the muscle at longer lengths may be beneficial for hypertrophy. Number 2, how stable is the exercise? Because if it's not stable, then good luck trying to train to failure. And number 3, how easy is it to progressive overload? So if we can't find a way to incrementally make things more difficult over time, then it's not gonna be the best exercise. So with that said, let's get into exercise number 1. So as you saw, this first variation is the bodyweight lateral raise that I saw from an Athlete X video. This looks crazy. I wanted to give it a try because I think if there is a way to train the side delts in a bodyweight format, it would be pretty good. However, in practice, it is just wildly unstable. Like, it's very hard to, I can't even talk when I'm doing it. So the pros of this exercise is it's body weight. You don't need any piece of equipment at all. You just need something relatively soft to lay on. However, the cons is it's wildly unstable, and dude, most people aren't gonna be able to do this, so I wanted to give a higher rating, but immediate D tier. Let's go on to exercise number 2. Now, the second exercise on the list is the standing dumbbell lateral raise that you guys are probably all familiar with. Now, because we're working with dumbbells and we're limited by gravity, this is gonna be a short and focused lateral raise exercise, meaning it's gonna be hardest at the top where the side delts are most contracted. And then on the flip side, there's pretty much no resistance when my arm's standing at my side down here. However, I'm not gonna nail on this exercise too hard because you can pretty much easily progress because you're working with dumbbells. It's isolateral, meaning each side delt is responsible for its own weight, which is good for like minimizing muscle imbalances. So my overall thoughts on this exercise, this may not be like the best exercise for hypertrophy. However, it is a valid option, so I'm gonna give it a solid B tier. Now, the third exercise is a seated dumbbell lateral raise, and as you probably expect, this pretty much accomplishes everything a standing dumbbell lateral raise does, but you're seated. So resistance profile is the same, it's still isolateral, still pretty easy to progress. However, because we're seated, it's gonna be slightly more stable than the standing variation. But with that said, I don't think the stability is game-changing compared to the standing lateral raise. I actually opt to do the standing personally, mainly because if you're using heavier dumbbells, sometimes dumbbells can hit the bench, which really throws me off. It's actually quite annoying, so I'll give this probably also a B tier. Let's move on to the next exercise. Number 4 is a chest-supported lateral raise. Now this, again, because we're working with dumbbells, accomplishes everything that a standing or a seated dumbbell lateral raise does. So resistance profile is the same, still gonna be shortened, still isolateral because we're working with dumbbells. But of course, because we're using this chest support, this is probably the most stable variation of a lateral raise that you can possibly do. And make sure to focus on keeping your body as well as your hips glued to the seat at all times. And if you do that, you're gonna find, man, you're a lot weaker than you probably thought. Now, because we're working with dumbbells and this is short and focused, this is a pretty difficult exercise to train all the way to failure. Like, you tend to kind of die on the set pretty quick. So what I recommend is doing lengthened partials after your set to failure with full range of motion. But yeah, overall, I do believe this is the best dumbbell variation of a lateral raise. So this is a definite A tier. And number 5 is the unilateral cheat dumbbell lateral raise. Now, even though this exercise looks fancy, the resistance profile of this is even worse than a traditional dumbbell lateral raise because you're using momentum at the bottom stretch portion, meaning there's like pretty much no resistance on the concentric because, of course, you're cheating. Now, because you're probably gonna be using a heavier dumbbell on a cheat lateral raise, it's gonna be harder to stabilize on this exercise. However, I will say if you're doing it unilaterally and you're bracing yourself with a bench or something like that, it can become manageable in my opinion. But when we talk about progressive overload, this is actually harder to progress because how do you track how much cheating you're actually doing so that you're actually progressing? Because let's say you use a heavier dumbbell, then you just end up cheating more. But on the flip side of that, you can pretty much regulate how much resistance you're using mid-set because you control ultimately how much cheating you're gonna be doing. So overall, pros and cons for this exercise, I think this definitely is a more advanced exercise to execute properly. So overall, I would give this a solid C tier. Now, I know all this talk about resistance profiles and whatnot can be kind of confusing. So if you want to take the guesswork out of getting to your fitness goals, definitely apply for my 1-on-1 fitness coaching program down in the link in the description. I provide you a custom workout program nutrition advice in the form of recipes that are portioned out to fit your goals, as well as the ability to message you whenever you want. So here's some transformations from my past clients. Pretty dang good. So if you're interested, apply in the link description. Look forward to working with you. All right, now the number 6 exercise is the unilateral easy curl lateral raise. Now, even though we're using a new piece of equipment, don't be confused. This is still gonna be a short and focused lateral raise exercise. So it's same as dumbbells, same resistance profile, same fact that we're probably gonna be doing isolateral. We're actually training with one arm, but I guess you could technically do this with 2 arms. However, the main gripe I have with this is this easy curl bar adds nothing to the movement, but just makes it harder for you to balance, because if you have an off grip, well, this is gonna happen. There's really no reason to be using an easy curl bar for a lateral raise unless you only have access to this equipment. And from a progressive overload standpoint, it's even harder to progress with this because easy curl bars generally go up in increments of 10 instead of dumbbells, which go up in increments of as low as 2.5. So overall, as you can probably imagine, I give this exercise definitely D tier. Let's move on. Now, number 7 isn't technically a lateral raise, but I included it because it's still a side delt exercise, and that is the upright row. Now, the upright row is a side delt exercise, but a lot of people complain that this gives them shoulder pain. So what you do is you want to make sure that you're taking a wider grip. However, because you're taking a wider grip, this is almost going to be a short and partial because my arm is outside my body rather than tucked down to my side. So this is still going to be a short and focused side delt exercise. And if you only have a straight bar to work with, this is probably the variation of a side delt exercise that you should probably be doing. However, I find that personally, this internally rotated upright position, basically at the top of an upright row, doesn't really feel comfortable. Even if I take a wider grip, it feels very sketchy to me. I don't deal with shoulder issues at all too. It's not like I've injured my shoulder in the past or anything like that. So with that said, I would try to avoid this exercise personally, if possible, but I know some people swear by this, but this is decently stable, so I stand by that. C tier. Real quick, if you guys like the outfit and you want to support the most underrated gym clothing brand in the world, that is Able. They released their men's line less than a year ago, so you're pretty much gonna be one of the first people wearing Able men's clothing. Now, these pants are really good, especially if you're a short king like myself. These are size extra small and they fit pretty much perfectly, especially in terms of the length. So if you want to cop some Able gear, definitely use my code, TylerPath. The support will be much, much appreciated. It really goes a long way. Now, number 8 is a bent arm lateral raise, which I think would be better seated, so I'm gonna sit down. Now, this is still gonna be a short and focused lateral raise exercise since we're using dumbbells. However, the moment arm is gonna be a little bit shorter, meaning it should feel more stable and you should be able to handle more weight doing a bent arm lateral raise than a straight arm one. That means in order to get the same resistance, you will have to use heavier weights. And I think a really big drawback on this exercise is having to maintain this bent arm position when you're doing the lateral raise, which usually ends up in your biceps and forearms fatiguing before your actual side delts, since literally you're holding the contraction in your arms the whole time. Now, this isn't an awful exercise if you use it as an intensity technique at the end of your set with a straight arm dumbbell lateral raise, but if you're just doing this standalone, I probably wouldn't recommend it, so I give this a solid D tier. So number 9 is the unilateral lying dumbbell lateral raise, which is actually a super novel exercise. This is where things get juicy, guys. So by manipulating our body and being, well, in this lying position, we're finally able to change the resistance profile of the movement to be somewhat more mid-length focused. At least we're getting away from being super short and focused, which is a good thing. Because the hardest part of this exercise is gonna be roughly around here, where we're pretty much perpendicular to gravity with our arm, which of course, if I stand up, is gonna be around midway through a normal range of motion of a standing dumbbell lateral raise. And I have to say, this exercise is surprisingly stable. I thought it was gonna be pretty like eh. And I wanna comment more on that stability aspect because I actually have to say this exercise is surprisingly stable. And I think it has to do with the fact that we're leaning on this bench. I feel like this is an exercise I can take all the way to failure and not think of like having to use momentum or anything like that. So I'm actually very impressed about this exercise. I've literally never done it before. So this is definitely like a high A tier. All right, so we're finally getting away from free weights. Number 10 is a bent arm machine lateral raise. Now, the lateral raise machine at your gym might look different, but they're pretty much all the same. This is gonna be a more mid-range focused lateral raise exercise, so we're able to actually get resistance in this more lengthened mid-range area, which is obviously a good thing for hypertrophy. Now, because we're using a machine, this is gonna be a super stable lateral raise variation. In fact, I would recommend if you're a beginner and you want to train the side delts all the way to failure, this is probably gonna be your best option. You can really grind through that last rep and not focus too much about stability or trying to stay balanced or anything like that, which is a really good thing. But I will say the downside of this exercise, if I have to be nitpicky, is one, it's not isolateral. Two, I would say it could be a little bit more lengthened focused, but I mean, let's give it some grace because most lateral raises are gonna be more shortened focused. And the last little gripe about this is because you're using a machine, I feel like the movement can feel a little bit linear at times, and what results is you can kind of feel it in your traps a little bit, but this is gonna be more of an individual thing. And overall, this is a super good lateral raise variation. I would give this an S tier, 100%. Now we're moving on to cables. Number 11 is a unilateral cable lateral raise from the floor. And that last part, the from the floor, is very important because this is gonna be a mid-range focus lateral raise exercise, meaning the hardest part is gonna be roughly halfway through the range of motion, right around here. I think one of the best ways to do a lateral raise is gonna be a unilateral cable variation like this, because ultimately it's very stable. However, I will say, to be a little bit nitpicky, it lacks a little bit of support as you approach failure, and it's quite easy to kind of use momentum if you kind of lose control, you know? And then from a progressive overload standpoint, it's pretty simple. You're using a cable stack, so you can easily add weight if you really need to. So this is definitely going into the A tier. And number 12 is gonna be a unilateral cable lateral raise as well, but we're raising it up to roughly hand height. And what this does is essentially changes the resistance profile of the movement. In this case, we're making it more lengthened focused, meaning this initial stretch part of the range of motion is gonna be the hardest part of the movement, which of course is beneficial for hypertrophy, as I've mentioned before. Now, this suffers from pretty much all the same problems as the other one, but also has pretty much all the advantages, plus being more lengthened focused. That's pretty much the only difference. And a quick tip here, instead of grabbing the handle, I like to use this as kind of like a cuff, and this even takes my grip out of the movement, which in my mind makes the movement feel, it makes it feel better in my opinion. And like you probably imagine, this is definitely going into the S tier. This is one of my favorite lateral raises. All right, number 13 is the cable Y raise. Now, this is gonna be also quite a novel exercise because this is gonna be a short and focused cable lateral raise variation. So it's super stable, but because it's short and focused, it's obviously not gonna be super ideal for hypertrophy, but I think it can be paired with a really good exercise, which is coming up next at number 14. And because of course we're working with cables, progressive overload isn't gonna be an issue on this exercise, so I'm gonna give this a solid B tier. 14 is the behind the back cable lateral raise. Now, the one novel thing we're able to achieve with getting our arm behind the back is we're able to get an even deeper stretch on the side delts, which paired with a lengthened focus resistance profile, if the cables is at around hand height, this exercise is pretty dang good. Now, it still suffers from all the challenges of the previous exercises where using momentum can be kind of an issue since you have nothing to brace against. However, when done correctly, I think this is one of the most lengthened focused lateral raise variations that you can possibly do. And because of that, you can pair it well with the cable Y raise as a superset, and I definitely will give this a high A tier. Number 15 is the lying cable lateral raise. This may seem like the most extra way to do a lateral raise, but I would tell you, it is definitely worth it because in my opinion, this is the most stable lateral raise variation without having to use a machine. Meaning it's not gonna be linear, so like you're gonna feel in your traps or anything. Like no, it still feels fluid. It's isolateral, so each arm, each side delt is responsible for its own weight. And because we can still cross our arms, we can still get resistance across our body as well as get a pretty good stretch, similarly on par with the behind back lateral raise. Now, the only downside I would say on this exercise is sometimes you can have the cables kind of rub up against each other, which is a little bit annoying, but I actually don't think this is as much of an issue as on the behind the back because you can see it, right? You can visually see yourself, so if you kind of just raise your arm a little bit, you can kind of mitigate that problem. Now let's be honest, the biggest downside to this exercise is probably the social factor of doing this exercise. If you're too self-conscious to do this, you might get a little bit embarrassed trying to do this exercise in a packed gym. Yes, I am in fact talking to you. But of course, social factor isn't a part of my criteria, so I give this exercise an immediate S tier. All right, now it is time to crown the best and worst lateral raise variation. But before we get into that, drop a comment down below what you think the best and what do you think the worst lateral raise variation is in the list of 15 listed in this video. But let's get into it. Starting with the worst, that has to go to the body weight lateral raise. Maybe this is a little bit of a cop-out, but I feel like most people aren't gonna be able to do that exercise properly. Now, if I didn't have to choose that one, Then I would go with the easy curl lateral raise, just because, again, there's no reason to be using the easy curl bar. It just kind of adds instability and, well, imbalance into the movement. Now let's get on to the best. And the crown for the best lateral raise variation goes to the lying cable lateral raise. Now there is a reason why I'm still doing this exercise. I still make videos about it despite getting flamed in the comments. But if you notice all the criticism that this exercise gets, it's all trivial stuff and it's not related to the exercise itself at all because, again, like I mentioned, it is a very sound exercise. It is almost as stable as using a machine. However, because you're not so linear, you're able to actually isolate the side delts a little bit better and not get as much trap involvement like on a bent arm machine lateral raise, which is a very novel thing. Trust me, you just try this exercise, go to the gym at night where no one's watching, just give it a try, just one set, and I will tell you, chances are it's gonna be the best your side delts has ever felt in exercise. I am really that confident on recommending this exercise. So, and I can't give credit for this. First person I saw doing this was Paul Carter, so props to him. Comment down below if you guys expected this to be #1 or not, but man, I'm glad I found this exercise. I thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with how I rank these exercises. But with that said, leave a like if you want to support my page, it'll be much appreciated, and hit subscribe to level up your physique. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.